Welcome back to another episode from Barking Bond's lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? We'd love to know. Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's dive into today's gripping story. Don't let bad mommy take us again. That was what two trembling little girls said as strangers pulled them out of the fire. They were shaking so hard their teeth clicked, tiny fingers clawing at the coats of the people who held them. Their trust had already been broken long before. The flames. You could see it in their eyes. The cabin they were found in sat hidden deep in the snowy forest, far from any road. And in that cabin's ruin, they left no written story, no spoken explanation, only scattered pictures drawn by unsteady hands. In those childish sketches were monsters with blurred-out faces, hands that reached, and shapes that hurt. That night, fate sent two unexpected saviors, a man still carrying ghosts of his own and a battle-worn K9 with one torn ear and a heart that refused to quit. Together they stumbled onto a truth no one in Redwood Hollow was ready to face. Before we go further, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Type your city in the comments. And if you believe that real family is sometimes built not from blood, but from bravery, hit subscribe, because this is the kind of story that lingers long after the snow has melted. The mountain town of Redwood Hollow slept under a heavy, muffled silence, wrapped in a quilt of deep white snow. Perched high in the Colorado Rockies, the air here didn't just chill, it bit. The forest surrounding the town stood in shadow, its tall pines swaying in a wind that whispered secrets older than the streets themselves. And on nights like this, deep in December, the sky a lid of low gray clouds. It felt like anything could happen, good or bad. Eli Braxton moved like something the forest already knew was there. At 36, he carried the look of a man who'd walked through too many wars and somehow returned. Tall, built with a soldier's frame, his movements were measured, almost soundless, as if he'd been trained to vanish in plain sight. The faint scar that curved from his cheek to his jawline was a reminder from Helmand Province, a place where shrapnel had once nearly taken his life. His pale green eyes looked like weathered glass under the moonlight, holding both discipline and the dull ache of someone who had buried too many friends. Walking just ahead was his partner, not a man, but a dog. Shadow, a 7-year-old German shepherd, padded through the snow without a single wasted step. His black and tan coat clung tight to a body built for speed and power, his shoulders square, his legs coiled like springs. One ear twitched. At every snap of a branch, every shift in the wind. A shallow groove marred the fur near his left flank, the mark from the day he'd shielded his handler from an explosion. He didn't need Eli's voice to understand, a tilt of the head, the slow intake of breath, and he was ready to act. Shadow wasn't a pet. He was a soldier, a sentinel, and maybe the last living soul Eli trusted without hesitation. Their cabin sat far from any street, down an unmarked trail no map bothered to show. It was small, log-built, and plain, chosen because Eli needed a place where the world wouldn't knock on his door. This night, like so many before, the man and dog patrolled the tree line together, boots and paws leaving a trail in untouched snow. The forest was still, too still. Then came the smell, sharp, wrong, smoke, black and curling, too heavy to belong to a fireplace, rising above the pines like a warning flag. Shadow froze first, ears pricked like arrows. A second later came the faint crack of burning, wood splintering under heat. Eli didn't think. He ran. Shadow bolted alongside him, matching his sprint stride for stride. They burst through the last of the trees and saw it. A 2-story wooden house, already swallowed by fire, orange flames, chewed through the lower floor while the upstairs glowed like the fevered eyes of something alive. No neighbors. No sirens, just fire and the endless cold. Then came the sound, high-pitched, desperate. A scream, a child's scream. Jesus, Eli breathed, already moving. He tore across the snow, shouldered the front door hard enough to splinter it, and stepped into the furnace. Inside, the heat slammed into him, wrapping his lungs in smoke. The air boiled against his skin, each breath tasting like ash. Flames crawled along the walls, devouring wallpaper and light alike. A faint whimper pulled him left, through a living room where toys melted into the boards and furniture lay overturned like shields after battle. And there, behind a sagging couch pressed into the corner, were two tiny shapes, twins, curled up together, small as kittens, eyes wide. Hey, it's okay. I've got you, he said, his voice low and urgent. One girl looked up, strands of dark hair plastered to her smoke-damp cheeks. The other didn't move. Eli scooped the first into his arms. She was feather-light, her fleece pajamas damp with sweat and smoke. Her little hands gripped his jacket like she'd never let go. And then, with a trembling whisper, she said the words that stopped him in his tracks. "Don't let bad mommy take us again." The sentence hit harder than the heat. Shadow barked once, sharp, warning. No more time to process. Eli grabbed the second girl, shifting her against his chest as she stirred with a faint moan. He ducked under a beam as it crashed, pushed through the rolling black smoke, and burst out into the snow. The cold hit like a slap. He staggered away from the collapsing house, the fire's roar muffled under the heavy night air. Kneeling, he set the girls gently down, checked their breathing. Alive. Shadow circled close, body tense, eyes fixed on the dark tree line. Minutes later, headlights cut through the trees. Help had arrived. Eli stood as the first paramedic. Clara Moore, tall, auburn hair braided tight, the town's only vet moonlighting as a winter medic, stepped out. She moved to the girls, her hands quick but gentle. "Where did you find them?" she asked without looking up. "In the back corner," Eli said. "One of them said something." "What?" Clara asked, checking a pulse. Eli's voice dropped. She said, "Don't let bad mommy take us again." Clara's hands paused just for a moment. She glanced at the soot-smeared child clutching a melted unicorn. "That's not something a 4-year-old says by accident," she murmured. "You wanted accelerant reports?" she asked, handing him a small, clear vial in an evidence bag. "I took a swab from Shadow's coat. He got burned through a chemical fire. Something industrial," Lode raised a brow. "That's not from a stovetop accident." "Exactly," Clara said. "You can smell it. Synthetic. Possibly methylenzine or a plastic solvent. I used to work with horses. Sometimes we'd clean tools with stuff like this. You don't use it near a fireplace," Lod happed, the side of his cane against the desk. "We need to identify everyone with access to that house. Vanessa Gray is listed as the owner, but she's been off the grid since mid-November. No social media activity, no bank transactions." "And Yvonne?" Clara asked. "Yvonne Gray," he said, pulling up a PDF scan of an old CPS report. "Filed for temporary guardianship 6 weeks ago. Claims Vanessa left the children with her voluntarily during a mental health sabbatical." Clara narrowed her eyes. "Vanessa never mentioned that to anyone in town." "She didn't," Lott agreed. "And that's not the part that worries me." He pulled up a second document. 3 years ago, Yvonne was investigated by Child Services in Missouri. Emotional endangerment, isolation, punishment, gaslighting. No criminal charges. Filed, but there was a pattern. She vanished a week later, relocated here under a new license. Clara crossed her arms. "You think she's capable of burning the house down with the girls inside?" Lott gave her a look that said he didn't deal in speculation. "I think we need to find her." That afternoon, Eli stood outside the medical center's side door with Shadow by his side. The dog's flank was healing well, and his gait had returned to normal, but he was more alert than usual. Ears twitching, head turning sharply at the slightest sound. Trauma affected animals differently than people. Shadow didn't have memories. He had associations, sense, movement, tension in Eli's shoulders, and something about that house still lingered, on Eli's clothes. He glanced down at the dog. "You felt something in there, didn't you?" Shadow didn't bark. He simply pressed his body closer to Eli's leg. At that same moment, Arya began drawing again. Inside the room, Dr. Lauren watched as the girl carefully filled in a new sketch. This time, it wasn't a woman, but a man, a stick figure with a large beard and a belt around his waist. He stood next to the woman with the blacked-out face. Underneath, in shaky crayon handwriting, Arya had written 2 letters, DK. When Clara and Lot arrived with news, the pieces began to click. Dylan Kane, Lot said grimly. Vanessa's ex, criminal record for assault, disappeared a year ago after a restraining order was filed. Last known address, a storage unit rental just outside town. He's not listed as family, but he's been known to manipulate women like Vanessa. I wouldn't be surprised if he was involved. Clara looked toward the hospital window. Inside, the twins now sat side by side, coloring in silence. Lot turned to Eli. She never said his name aloud. "No," Eli said, "just bad mommy, and now this DKL exhaled. He may not have lit the match, but he's in the room where it happened." Later. That evening, as the last light drained from the sky, Clara sat with Eli at the vet's office, closed for the night. The smell of antiseptic and cedar still clung to the air. Shadow rested on a dog bed nearby, eyes barely open. Clara glanced at Eli. "What are you going to do if Vanessa shows up?" Eli stared out the frosted window. "Ask her one question. Why did she leave her daughters with someone who scared them?" Clara folded her hands. Maybe she didn't know. "Maybe," Eli said quietly. She knew and couldn't stop it. Neither of them noticed Shadow had raised his head. Outside, in Thessalon's of the snowy woods, something stirred. The wind had shifted. Snow no longer fell gently. It whispered through the pine trees like a warning, dry and brittle, the kind that stung your eyes and stilled the birds. Redwood Hollows Mountains had grown sharper overnight, the sky turning a dense steel gray. It was nearing the winter solstice, and the forest seemed to know it. Everything in the woods was waiting for truth, for reckoning, for something to surface that had long been buried under silence and fear. Inside the hospital, the warmth did little to chase away the cold that clung to Arya and Laya. But something had changed. A thread perhaps had begun to stitch. The girls now followed Eli and Shadow with quiet familiarity, their gazes tracking the dog's every movement, their fingers occasionally brushing against Eli's sleeve like testing the texture of safety. Arya had even begun to hum, not words, just notes, soft asmist. That afternoon, Arya drew again. Eli and Clara were present this time. Arya sat cross-legged on the padded floor of the hospital's playroom, her small hands gripping crayon with more certainty than speech. The sketch unfolded in rough, slanted lines. A woman with long, tangled hair, holding a silver canister and a book of matches. Behind her, jagged orange streaks rose from a house drawn with crayon, too dark to be wood. Clara leaned forward. "Is that gas?" Arya nodded, her expression unreadable. Then she drew another figure, a man standing far behind the woman, arms crossed. His beard was scribbled in black, and his eyes were 2 angry dots. Eli crouched beside her. "Who is he?" Arya pressed the crayon to the corner of the paper and slowly wrote. DK Clara exchanged a look with Eli. "That's Dylan Kane, or what's left of him in their memory." Shadow stirred at the door, tail flicking. He'd been uneasy all day, pacing, pausing, returning to sit near the window as if sensing something in the cold just beyond the trees. Later that night, Eli returned to his cabin with Shadow. As he undid the latch to let the dog out into the snow-covered yard, Shadow paused, head tilted. Then he darted into the woods, quick and sure. Eli called after him, "Shadow, hold up." But the dog didn't stop. Eli grabbed his coat and flashlight, then followed Boots crunching into the crust of the snow. The trail led deeper into the forest than Shadow had ever gone before, without command. After 15 minutes, Eli saw the silhouette, Shadow standing motionless in front of a small, long-abandoned hunting shelter. The door hung crooked on one hinge. Ellie approached slowly, flashlight sweeping over the scene. The lock was broken. Inside, the space was cramped, dark, and bitterly cold. Blankets had been laid on the floor recently. A tin cup sat beside an empty water bottle, and in the corner, something soft caught the light. A knitted burgundy scarf, damp and flecked with blood. Eli recognized it immediately. Vanessa's scarf. Shadow sniffed it, then growled low, not out of aggression, but warning. On the floor next to it lay a stuffed rabbit, one ear torn, the stitching fraying at the seams. It was covered in soot and bore a faint scent of burnt plastic. Vanessa was here, Eli whispered. He took the scarf, wrapped it in a sterile cloth from his backpack, and turned back toward the cabin. Shadow lingered a moment longer, then followed silently. The next morning at Clara's clinic, Shay ran tests on the blood sample from the scarf. Clara had opened her clinic early just for this, something she didn't do often. The space smelled faintly of pine disinfectant and dog shampoo. A small arranged tabby named Cricut, the resident rescue cat, sat on the counter, watching silently. Clara had taken Cricut in after it was found nearly frozen behind the post office 2 years ago. Since then, the cat had become something of a guardian, spirit in the clinic, serene and sharp-eyed. Clara ran the results twice to be certain. "It's not Vanessa's blood," she said, looking at Eli. "It's AB negative. Vanessa's medical file says she's O positive. Then whose is it? I compared it with the old blood sample from Shadow's coat, the one from the fire. It's the same. The blood on Vanessa's scarf is Ivan's." Eli blinked. Yvonne was at the fire and injured. Clara confirmed. "She's alive, which means if Vanessa left that scarf behind, she might have escaped or was forced to leave it behind." Eli stepped back, mind racing. "That shelter, it's old. No tracks around it except Shadow's and mine. If Vanessa had been there recently, someone wiped the place down." Clara frowned. "Or someone is still watching it." Back at the precinct, Detective Reuben Lott was seated at his cluttered desk, coffee steaming beside a pile of updated case notes. His cane rested against the drawer, though he rarely used it indoors. Across from him sat a younger officer, Kyle Rennick, 28, a new transfer from Denver with a pale face and sharp cheekbones. Kyle was eager, detail-oriented, and too clean-shaven to have seen much real dirt, but he was loyal, and Lott appreciated that. "I ran the storage unit records again," Kyle said. "Dylan Kane rented a second unit under a different name 2 weeks ago. A woman was seen dropping off something there 3 nights ago. Blonde, small frame, no security footage, but the night manager said she looked injured." "Vanessa," Lott asked. "Possibly, or Yvonne, if she's the one moving Vanessa around. Either way, we've got a location." Lott stood, rubbing his shoulder. "Get me the unit number and call Braxton. He needs to see this." That night, Eli drove back out to the edge of town. Kyle met him in the parking lot of the storage facility, flashlight in hand. The snow had eased, but the air still stung. They opened, unit with bolt cutters. Inside, it smelled faintly of gasoline. Boxes lined the walls. In the back, they found a rolled-up sleeping bag, another scarf, gray and moth-eaten, and a cheap flip phone with the battery removed. Then, against the far wall, something strange. A mirror full length, cracked, covered in childlike stickers. Eli stared at it. Why would they keep this? Kyle bent down and opened a small suitcase under the mirror. Inside were a set of drawings, almost all done in the same crayon Arya had used. The same blacked-out face, the same house on fire. But one was different. It was a woman, clear, not blacked out, lying on the floor, arms tied. Over her stood a man with a red X across his chest. Eli exhaled. They saw this happen. Kyle looked over. What do we do with this? Eli's voice was cold. We find them. We don't wait. The storm moved in quickly as if it had been waiting behind the ridgeline for the perfect moment. Snow came first in whispers, then with fists, coating the forest in a furious white silence. The roads to the northern range were already closing down, but Eli Braxton wasn't stopping. He gripped the wheel of his pickup tighter, jaw set, eyes focused through the windshield as the wipers fought thick flakes. Shadow sat in the passenger seat, still and alert, his body tensed with a readiness Eli recognized from their tours overseas. The GPS tracker had pinged only once. An old phone signal embedded deep within a battered stuffed rabbit. Clara had found the faint signal hours earlier when inspecting the toy recovered from the Choi. The GPS was barely functional, but it had traced to a location 23 mi north near the edge of Winter Hollow Ridge, a place mostly used for seasonal cabins. Isolated, quiet, the kind of place no one checks in winter. Eli had called Lot, but the storm had already scrambled the towers. The officer on duty, a wiry man named Brad Chilton, mid-40s, short red hair, and a voice always slightly out of breath, had tried to relay the coordinates through dispatch, but that was failing. "You're going alone?" Clara had asked, eyes sharp under the emergency clinic lights. Her dark green parka was flecked with blood from a stray raccoon she'd treated earlier. "That place isn't patrolled till spring." Eli had nodded. "There's no time now." The cabin emerged through the trees like a bruise beneath snow, roof sagging under ice, smoke curling from Asmal rusted chimney. Eli pulled the truck off the road and killed the engine. Shadow was already up, ears alert, nose twitching. "Let's move," Eli whispered. The two cut through the woods, boots crunching on snowpack. Eli moved silently, flashlight off, hand on his holster. As they neared the cabin, Shadow growled. A low, throaty sound that vibrated through the trees. There were tracks, snow compacted recently and a second set leading toward the back. From within, voices. Eli approached the frosted window slowly, then crouched low. Through the crack in the curtain, he saw a woman tied to a chair, duct tape over her mouth, wrists bruised. Vanessa. She looked gaunt, her once golden hair now tangled, face pale from exposure and fear. Her eyes, hollow but alert, flicked around the room as a man moved toward her with papers in hand. Dylan Kane. He was taller than Eli had remembered from the mugshots, maybe 6 feet, with a dark beard and thick winter coat half unzipped. His build was solid, but there was something jittery in his movements. His hands twitching, eyes darting, his voice was low, coaxing, calculated. "You sign this," Dylan said, waving a document in her face. "And we're done. Just a formality, custody transfer." "You and I both." "No, you're not getting out of this mess with your girls. Let me fix this. Let me fix you." Vanessa shook her head violently, eyes wet with rage. Dylan cursed and turned his back. That's when Eli moved. He pushed through the back door in one smooth motion, Shadow slipping in silently ahead. Dylan turned too late. Eli had him in a grip before the man could reach the drawer where a small hunting knife waited. They struggled across the floor, knocking over a table. Shadow lunged when Dylan broke free, slamming into the man's legs as he ached for the blade. Dylan screamed as the dog bit deep into his forearm, knocking him back into the wall. Eli moved, fast, using a zip tie to bind Dylan's wrists before the man could recover. "You son of a," Dylan spat, struggling. Vanessa gasped through the tape. Eli moved to her, gently cutting the bonds, then pulling the duct tape from her mouth. She coughed, violently, clutching her wrists. "You're safe now," he said softly. Vanessa's voice cracked as she whispered. "Where are the girls?" Eli paused. "They're safe. Clara and Lot are with them." Vanessa broke. She sank to the floor, sobbing into her hands. "I didn't know. I thought Yvonne would be safe. I thought she loved them." She wept, rocking, slightly. "I was so scared. He came back and I didn't know who else to call. I left them with her because I thought she was better than him." Eli knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "They forgave you the second they saw me walk through the door. They just want you back." Outside, headlights finally broke through the trees. It was Officer Kyle Rennick, his cruiser half covered in snow, windshield wipers frozen in mid-sweep. He stepped out, breath huffing in clouds, his young face drawn tight, with concern. "Dispatch got the message," Kyle said. "We had to take the long way around, lots en route, but the main bridge froze out." He looked down at Dylan, who was still writhing on the floor, now bleeding from his arm. "This him?" Eli nodded. Vanessa stood shakily, her legs weak from confinement. Kyle helped her to the cruiser, wrapping her in a thick emergency blanket. Shadow remained close, his body always between Dylan and Eli, even as the man muttered curses under his breath. As they waited for backup, Kyle returned from the cruiser with news. He had passports in the back room. Fakes, one for him, two for the girls. Different last names, destination, Alberta. He was leaving tonight. Eli stared at the cabin. "What about the girls?" Vanessa asked again. "They know you're alive," Eli replied. "But there's a thing Arya said days ago." She whispered, "Don't let bad mommy take us again." "I thought she may aunt you." Vanessa's lips trembled. "No," she whispered. "She meant Yvonne, my cousin. I left them with her because I trusted her. She'd helped me before. But this time she had something wrong in her eyes. I should have seen it." Eli didn't reply. He simply nodded, his eyes softening. That night, as they transported Dylan Kane to the Bridgefield Holding Center and Vanessa to Hollow Pines for medical treatment, the snow finally began to slow. The storm had passed, but what it left behind would take longer to thaw. It was late January in Redwood Hollow, and though the storms had passed, winter still gripped the town in its pale, quiet hands. Snow clung to rooftops like unfinished thoughts, and icicles hung heavy from porch eaves, waiting for the first true melt. But inside the small white house, nestled near the tree-ine, once abandoned, now warm, something had begun to shift. Something living, something like healing. The living room was modest, but glowing with light. A fire crackled in the hearth. Crayon drawings taped along the wall curved around the edges of a frame photograph that Vanessa had found in a dusty box. Her younger self, Eli in uniform, standing on either side of a smiling golden retriever from a decade past. That photo, like the house, had been rescued from the ashes. Now it rested beside Arya's newest drawing. 4 figures at a table. A large dog sitting beneath a birthday cake drawn with 9 candles. 2 for each girl, 1 in the center with no label. Eli Braxton moved around the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of someone used to silence. He wore a simple gray sweater and jeans. His once shaved hair grown in slightly uneven patches. His movements were slower now, less like a soldier on patrol, more like a man trying to get breakfast just right. His hands were still calloused from years in service, but they handled eggs and toast with gentle precision. The past still lived in his bones, but it didn't rule his breath anymore. Shadow, now 8, lay stretched near the back door, his furs leak again, and his burn wound nearly invisible beneath a small patch of regrown sable hair. He no longer flinched at footsteps or firelight. He kept his amber eyes on the girls when they moved, watchful, protective, but without tension. Occasionally, when Laya giggled, his tail thumped softly against the wood floor. Vanessa Gray sat at the small round table in the center of the room. She had changed since the night Eli found her. Her posture straighter, cheeks fuller, though faint. Shadows still lingered beneath her eyes. Her honey blonde hair had been cut short tochen length. A practical choice during her hospital stay, but it suited her. Her voice had returned as well, gentle, low, and often trembling when she laughed too hard. She had been broken, but not shattered. Therapy sessions 3 times a week were helping, but so was being home. The girls sat across from her, wrapped, in matching flannel pajamas dotted with tiny foxes. Arya's hair was always neater, Laya's curls wilder. They still slept in the same bed, still touched fingertips in their sleep, but they no longer screamed when the lights flicked off. That morning, when Vanessa offered to braid their hair for the first time since coming home, both girls had nodded. And when Arya finished her cereal, she wiped her mouth with the back of her sleeve and looked up with solemn eyes. "Mommy." Vanessa froze for half a breath, spoon halfway to her lips. "Yes, baby." Arya didn't say anything else. She just smiled. Laya echoed softer. "Mommy." Vanessa put her spoon down, turned to Eli, but his eyes were already shining. They had made it through the fire. Now they were starting to live again. Later that day, as the sun broke through the trees for the first time, in weeks, Clara Moore stood across the narrow trail behind the house. She wore a navy blue coat, heavy brown boots, and a knit cappled over her copper-colored braid. Her hands were tucked into deep pockets, and her breath puffed like smoke from astery not yet told. She didn't approach. She just watched. From the window, Arya waved. Clara waved back, smiled, then turned and walked back toward her truck, boots crunching snow. In her glove compartment was a leather-bound journal. She paused, pulled it out, and flipped to a fresh page. Her handwriting was neat, looping slightly, always centered on the lines. Some loves arrive like lightning. Others crawl in like dawn. But the rarest kind are built, not on sparks, but on hands that reach out in the dark, expecting nothing, asking nothing, simply staying. I've seen many types of family in this town. Some built from blood, others from survival. Today I saw one stitched from fire, and it held. She closed the journal, tucked it back into place, and drove away. That night, the house was filled with the smell of baking, vanilla, and candle wax. It wasn't a party, not in the traditional sense. No guests, no balloons, no streamers. But there was cake, a simple one. Chocolate with cream frosting made with Arya's help and Laya's laughter. Vanessa lit the candles. Eli dimmed the lights. "Make a wish," he said softly. Both girls looked at each other, then at Vanessa, then at Shadow, and blew. The lights came back in. Vanessa cut slices. Shadow got a corner without icing, which he ate, politely under the table. Eli brought out mugs of warm milk for the girls, tea for Vanessa. They all sat together in the cozy quiet. "Can we draw more tonight?" Arya asked. "Only if I get to draw too," Eli said. Vanessa laughed. "You can't even draw a stick figure. I drew a perfect dog once." Shadow lifted his head, ears twitching. Laya giggled. Eli stood and grabbed the box of crayons from the corner. A stack of paper was passed around. That night, the pictures looked different. Houses not burning, faces not blanked out. No black ovals, no hands holding belts or canisters, just 4 people and a dog. That same night, in her office at the Bridgefield Police Department, Clara delivered a final report to Detective Lott. He sat behind his usual desk, glasses low on his nose, rubbing the side of his temple. The storm had passed. The arrest was secure. And Yvonne had been located hiding in an abandoned gas station restroom 3 towns over, emaciated, shaking, and ranting about voices in the walls. She was now undergoing psychiatric evaluation in a secure facility. Dylan Kane had pleaded guilty. to multiple charges. No trial would be needed. The case legally was closed, but not for Lot. He glanced at the final page of the report, eyes narrowing on a detail. She said she burned the house, Clara said softly, but didn't mean to hurt the girls. Lot didn't look up. Intent doesn't erase damage. No, Clara agreed, but maybe healing can. She placed one last folder on the desk. Photos of Arya and Laya playing outside, Shadow watching from the porch, Vanessa tending a small potted plant on the steps, Eli chopping firewood. Simple moments, not evidence, not exhibits, just proof. Thought you'd want to see how the story ends, she said. Lot glanced at her, the lines on his face relaxing slightly. No, he said, setting the file aside. How it begins again. Sometimes a miracle doesn't come with thunder or lightning. It arrives in the quiet footsteps of a soldier in the snow, in the soft bark of a loyal dog who won't leave a child's side, and in the broken voice of a mother whispering, "I'm still here." This story reminds us that healing takes time, but love, real love, never gives up. It fights through fire, snow, and silence. It finds you even when you've stopped looking. If you believe like we do that God sends us the right people, even the furry ones at just the right time, then share this story with someone who needs a little hope today. Leave a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your story. And may God bless you and protect your family, especially the smallest voices among us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story that could bring light into someone's darkest